Hi, Charlotte.
Good
Good
morning,
morning.
Rabbi.
Hey, Shell.
Hey, hi everyone.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
How was the graduation?
Good. Very interesting. Very good.
Everybody well
Yeah,
down
everybody.
there?
Yep. Yep.
Why
Everybody's.
not?
What's
Yeah.
he doing next year? Going on to college or?
Yeah. Yeah. It was my oldest grandson's graduating. He graduated. He's going for to Jacksonville State University, which
Hmm.
is in Alabama. Surprisingly, not Florida.
Jacksonville's, I thought would be Florida.
Yeah, you would think that, but
Yeah,
it's in Alabama. Anyway, he's going for economics. So.
All right,
good.
I'll be right back. I'm just finishing up some stuff on our study sheet.
Over.
Hi, Charlotte.
Hello, dear. How are
Hi,
you?
Carol.
Hi,
Hi.
Carol.
Hi.
In a moment.
Okay.
Rabbi, are you going to be here this Shabbat
Oh
or?
yeah, I'm here this week.
Okay, I
It's
thought Shavuot.
after Shavuot,
Oh,
which
okay. Okay.
yeah, so I didn't have a chance to finish up typing out clearly this
When is Shavuos?
The
in
8th, I think it was.
the 11th.
The 11th, is it?
Tuesday night, the 11th will be our Tikkun Leil Shavuot, and then the 12th and 13th, our Shavuot itself,
Oh,
and then I leave the 14th,
okay.
Where are you going?
to Chicago, actually to Michigan to visit, my, brother and sister-in-law
Oh,
at their
very good.
place in, Chicago.
Nice.
Yeah, we're very excited.
Good.
Michelle, were you and Nancy just away
Yes.
somewhere?
Yeah, my oldest grandson graduated.
Oh, Mazel Tov.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Hello, everybody.
Hi,
Hi, Susie, how are
Susie.
you?
Good.
Hi, Susie.
But I will have to leave early again today.
Okay.
So Mazel Tov, Shell, on your graduation.
thank you. Thank you.
You're going to have a lot more coming up in the next 20 years.
Yes. Well, I have one myself.
Oh, good for you.
Next Friday.
Oh, who's graduating? Oh,
Yeah, Maya is graduating from elementary school and
to
she's
middle
going to
school. Yeah.
SAR.
Yeah, I knew that one. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, sorry. All right, I may just translate this last part instead of keeping you all waiting. So let me share my screen. Okay. And yes, let me. Okay, now everything should be visible.
Yep.
But first we're going to take a look Oh, I have to make this one larger too. Sorry. All right. All right. So now we are coming to the last parasha in Sefer Vayikra. And that, of course, is Bechukotai. And it is mostly made up of the blessings and curses, the typical conclusion in the ancient world to a law code. And we'll have the same thing at the end of Sefer Devarim. So, but let's just get kind of an introduction. Here's Rabbi Zucker. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, who would like to just read this? We just have to go through it quickly. It's okay. Thanks, Susie.
Okay, the epilogue to the Holiness Code is the only composition within the book of Leviticus that is neither legal nor ritual in character. For the rest, Leviticus is made up of collections of religious law and descriptions of ritual celebrations, all of which are written in formulaic language. In both form and function, the epilogue is the counterpart of Devarim 28:30. Each composition appears after a collection of laws and seems to reinforce the sanction of those laws. Two major principles of biblical religion find expression in these epilogues: the concept of free will and the doctrine of reward and punishment. Obedience to God's will brings reward. Disobedience brings dire punishment. The choice rests with the people of Israel and its leaders. The epilogue
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to catch that, just so we have an overall sense of what's in this parasha. The whole question of reward and punishment is a very complicated question, but that's not what we're looking at today. And then he goes on to talk about the different parts. And the beginning of the parasha, Im bechukotai telechu, mishpatai tishmeru, vasitem otam. Let's just very quickly read what Levine has to say here of the opening lines.
Verse 3, you mean?
Yes, verse 3 here, the blessing.
If you follow my laws, the Hebrew idiom im bechokotai telecho, literally, if you walk in my laws, conceives of God's laws and commandments as the right path of life, a frequent theme in biblical literature. This statement sets the tone for the entire blessing.
And of course, it sets the tone really for all subsequent Jewish behavior as we talk about our the Torah as providing halacha. Halacha we generally translate as law, but it really means the way one goes, going. So it's the same thing. Im bechukotai telechu. If you go, if you walk in my ways, go on.
And faithfully observe my commandments. Literally, observe and do my commandments. The two verbs reinforce one another, yielding the sense of thoroughgoing observance.
Okay, and that brings us to examination of our parasha. And here is the first line of the parasha. Im bechukotai telechu v'et mitzvot. That should be, there's no question mark in the Torah. Im bechukotai telechu v'et mitzvotai tishmeru v'asitem otam. If you, using the Fox translation, if by my laws you walk and my commands you keep and observe them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you will get rain in your time. We get the blessings. So anything strike you unusual about this sentence?
If you keep commandments, obviously you're observing them, so must be some purpose in writing that twice.
Yeah, seems to be a
It's
rather,
almost three
for,
times
pardon
because
me, yeah.
because
Okay, go ahead,
it's
Susie,
my
sorry.
laws you walk.
Yeah, and in my laws you walk, in my commands you keep, and observe them. Like, okay, we get it. It seems to be excessive, as well as somebody will call it, and when we take a look at the commentaries, excessive verbiage. Now, of course, it's just biblical style, and that's how Levine has interpreted them, that this is just there for emphasis. It's a stylistic feature. But for our rabbis, nothing is just stylistic. Now, then they certainly know the style of Torah, and they would not deny that this is stylistic, but there's much more there. So let's see how our Mefarshim begin to look at this. First of all, we kind of have to begin with Rashi. I can keep going, Susie.
If by my laws you walk, one might think that this denotes the fulfillment of the commandments. But when scripture states, and my commands you keep and observe them, it is plain that in this passage there is mentioned the fulfillment of the commands. How then I don't know what that is.
How then must I explain?
Oh, how then must I explain if by my laws you walk, as an admonition that you should study the Torah laboriously?
Okay. So how is Rashi initially beginning, or how does Rashi explain, following rabbinic tradition, what are all these different terms for? What are they talking about?
You have to study the Torah besides keeping everything.
Right. So it's and this is certainly not unusual within our tradition, that there are things that we do, but you also have to study them. We just completed, we are completing tomorrow, on Saturday, the reading of Sefer Vayikra, much of which are laws that at a certain point in our tradition, in our history, I should say, were no longer applicable. We no longer had the Mishkan. We no longer had the Beit HaMikdash. And yet our rabbis still have the sense that we get some zchut, some merit, just for studying them. And it certainly, even though they were no longer operative for much of the rabbinic period, or at least half the rabbinic period, that didn't stop the rabbis from commenting on them. So, and even 1/3 of the Mishnah deals with rules, regulations, laws concerning the Beit HaMikdash. And of course, the Mishnah is edited around the year 200, 130 years after the temple was destroyed. So,
You have to keep in mind that there really was probably up until the Arab conquest a serious hope that it would be restored.
oh yeah, no question, no question. But there's a recognition. I mean, what I'm just trying to state here is that there's a recognition that it's not just the observance, but it's also the study that is crucial to observing them. Yeah, not of course they hoped it would be rebuilt, but in the meantime, you got schar just for studying all of these details. Yehudi?
I think we also have to understand that even if part of the package cannot be observed at some particular time, it doesn't take away in any way from the fact that it was intended as a full package. In other words, if
Right.
I want to understand what Spirat HaOmer is about, as I count it with a bracha every night, and I'm almost less than 2 weeks till completing it, and I think about the way it was, I am going to learn my Menachos. I'm going to learn about Minchas Omer. I'm going to also learn about the Mincha that's called Shtei Alechem that's offered on Chag HaShavuot. It doesn't decide for the difference to whether or not we're doing that anymore. If you don't understand what that's about, you don't understand the package. I mean, you
Right.
can go ahead and say Shavuot is about the giving of the Torah, but that's not part of the original package. It's not mentioned anywhere in the whole Tanakh. I don't mind adding on to the package as the centuries go by, but let's understand what the package was in the first place. Otherwise, you're not basically really learning the parsha.
Right. Yeah, I'm not that I totally agree with all of that. I'm not that's but there's this sense of, whether or not they're practical, you still study. We may study parts of the Mishnah that are not at the moment applicable, but we not only study that, but we certainly study the stuff that still is absolutely applicable. So you're right. I mean, there's a whole package here, and we are supposed to study it. But here's how Rashi is getting out of this seemingly excess or repetitious kind of language is that, it's talking about doing the mitzvot, but included in that is also studying them. Now, not only do we study them. Well, let's finish Rashi first. Go ahead, Susie, and my commands.
And my commands you keep. Study the Torah laboriously with the intention to take heed and to fulfill its teachings, as it is said in Dvarim, and ye shall learn them and take heed to do them.
Okay, so there are clearly many reasons why it's not just about doing, which is such a crucial element in Judaism, but it's also about learning. And why is the learning so important? Yehudi already mentioned one element. What else?
To understand them better, to not just
Yeah,
rote.
right. It's not just rote. You have to understand them. You want to know what you're doing and think about what you're doing. There's a whole discussion in the Talmud. Mitzvot shrichot kavanah. Do the mitzvot require intention? Like if you do a mitzvah and but not necessarily your intention, do you still get brownie points for it, as it were? I'm being a little flippant here, but it's a serious question. Mitzvot shrichot kavanah, and the reality is not necessarily, because the mitzvot themselves are important in and of themselves. However, the hope is that even doing them without kavanah, you will do them with kavanah, and they will be taken in the proper sense. I mean, it's already in rabbinic times. Of course, the Kabbalists will do considerably more with this than the whole notion of kavanah, that, it's not just performing the act, but if you perform the act with the proper kavanah, then that's what really opens up the channels from the divine to the human, from the divine world into our world. So it's got performing a mitzvah with intention has got cosmic implications. Yehudi?
I also would like to make a little more clear what I said before, because what I said before is not what you just said. I agree with what you said. It's just not what I said before. What I said before is that if let's say I had absolutely no idea in practice of what Tfilat HaOmer was about, and all I was told was that I have to count every single night and say the bracha and make sure I do that at nighttime and not wait till the next day, and et cetera, et cetera. And I did it with that intention, then I'd be okay, and basically the mitzvah would be performed. What basically I think Rashi is saying here is, but if you know you're going to perform the mitzvah, try to sit down and learn a little more about that mitzvah. Okay, not just for those parts of it that are applicable today, but those parts of it that are no longer applicable today. Your Kiyum HaMitzvah will be tremendously enhanced for you, not in terms of what kind of impression it's going to be making Hashem. Okay, it's for you yourself will become a much better Jew if you know what you're doing. Okay, and you know why you're doing it. Okay, and I put a little effort into understanding what you're doing is distinguished from just do it. Okay,
Right.
yes, you'll still get, like you said, brownie points even if you just do it. But the bottom line is that's not the way it should be done. It should be done with an understanding that what you're about to do is a sacred task and deserves all the effort you can put into it to do it and understand it properly.
Yeah, exactly. And if we think about how we perform mitzvot, um, you there's often, depending on the mitzvah, there's often a whole choreography, and the choreography is tied into thinking about the mitzvah. It's not just performing the mitzvah. We just celebrated Pesach. So, for example, when you're supposed to eat a particular amount of matzah within a particular time. And you can pick up some Haggadot that talk about what are the actual measurements, what's kazayit, what's like an olive. But the whole idea also is, if you will, a kind of mindfulness. It's not just in the Buddhists, but when you taste the matzah for the first time at the Seder, you're supposed to, it's not just you take a little nibble, but you're supposed to eat it and taste it. And it's more than just the act. There's also there are feelings that come with it. There are ideas that come with it. And, when you taste the dryness of the matzah, it's an experience. It's not just an act. It's an experience. And I think that's true for many things. As Yehudi just said, it enhances our Jewish experience, not just by performing the mitzvot, but by understanding them. Carol, you made the same comment. We understand what we're doing. And by the way, sometimes we need to have that understanding to perform the mitzvah properly. You can joke about how day schools have a bracha bees, where you throw out a food or an object or something, and the kids have to identify the proper bracha. But it's also a way of thinking about the world and understanding the world around us. It's being conscious and mindful of what's going on. And
Certainly is,
certainly,
Rabbi Poppy. One of the things people always should think about is, what's considered the top-notch food you can put on the table? Meat, right? In the Jewish bracha system, meat is all the way at the bottom with shahakol, okay? Along with eggs and water, all right? What's our top-notch bracha? First bread, then
bread.
wine, then stuff that grows on a tree and stuff that grows out of the ground, but not on a tree, etc., etc. And yes, the idea of learning which bracha to say is to learn what the Torah considers to be the foods that are higher on the food chain, the spiritual food chain, not how many calories they have. Okay,
One of my great moments, I was at Ramah, Canada, and I went to pick up Noah to bring her home. And she was in the mirpa'ah, in the infirmary. She had a cold. She was okay. But heavy rain, and then suddenly there was a double rainbow, which first of all is wonderful because it's gorgeous. But you had practically an entire camp running around. What's the bracha? So it's not just, wow, it's a beautiful rainbow, which everybody could see and everybody enjoyed, but let's think about this experience. How do we think about this experience as Jews?
Focuses you on what you're supposed to think. So that's that is not the same kind of bracha as, let's say, Oset Ma'aseh Breshit. My son was awfully disappointed when he tells me, and I'm going to drive over to Rochester to see the total eclipse. And Daddy, the only bracha you say for that is Oset Ma'aseh Breshit. Like, he expected something a lot more from a solar eclipse, a total eclipse, And I'll tell you, I said, Nachum, I'll tell you why that's such a low level bracha, because in the time of the Tanakh, that wasn't considered a phenomenon. It was considered a curse. It was considered a punishment. In the time of the rabbis, they called it Rikuin HaMa'orot. In the time of the Tanakh, it's one of the ways that Hashem singles out the people we intend to punish. Remember how Amos describes it? Okay? So, in other words, yes, you'll learn something about our value system from just simply seeing what brachas is prescribed. It's a very, very useful thing to learn.
Yeah, and it's not just, and by the way, even our simple brachot, Ha'osem Ma'aseh V'Reshit, one who performs the acts of creation, that's a pretty powerful bracha in and of itself. Think about, where does the world come from? It's not, wow, a big noise, the Big Bang. I know that's more complicated. It's not really about noise, but it's thinking about, where do we come from? How is the world constructed? And so many other brachot. It's about creating an experience. I've often said that a bracha is really kind of a meeting point between the divine and the human, where it's not just acknowledging an act, but creating an experience.
But
And
it's
that's
always
religious
got to
living.
have a divine component in it. You never make a bracha on a strictly ben adam l'chaveiro thing. In other words, like going to make a shiva call, or going to visit someone in the hospital, or even giving tzedakah. There is no bracha there, because those things are things that everybody does, not just Jews. Okay?
Right.
So as a practical matter, you can't say Asher Kitchelim b'mitzvotav about things of that nature.
Right.
Okay? If there's no divine element in it, there's no bracha involved.
But it's still, but even that form of the bracha, you can just say Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, Haosem ma'aseh v'reshit, Borei pri agafen. They're wonderful, acknowledging God as creator, but also, when it goes further, when it is over an act, Asher kiddishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, who has sanctified us through the commandments. It's about holy living. The bracha. And here, I think Rashi is getting, and we'll see other commentators, that, you walk in my ways, you follow my laws. But it's not just following the laws. There's much more to it. And this is also Ibn Ezra, a little bit simpler. He says a similar thing. Susie, go on. If by my laws you walk.
So could you have somebody else read?
Sure, no problem. Anyone, any volunteer?
If by my laws you walk, this is a commandment to study, to teach, and to observe.
Aha. So again, this is more than just doing. What else is it?
Teaching
There's
and studying, of course.
Well, yeah, teaching them and studying them. So here too, he emphasizes that, walking in God's ways is not just simply performing mitzvot, but understanding them, and in some ways modeling them, teaching other people. And of course, in the paragraph, but the bracha before the Shema, v'tein belibenu lahavinu lahaskia lilmod ulilamed lishmor v'la'asot. We should understand and discern, and we should do and perform and teach. There's
Don't
both the
forget
theoretical.
You're going to
Right.
love doing it a lot more if you understand what you're doing, and you're not just doing it because someone commanded you to do it. That's I think, and we after last show the two Kayem we code the break how much ourselves a bit and I also realize there's some difficulties. That's why you say afterwards, in other words, this isn't easy. It requires a lot of work. Okay, I've been working on some of these things all my life, and I'm no youngster, and I still feel there's plenty more to do.
Yeah. I generally feel that I'm almost at the point where I can begin studying. I almost know enough to begin studying. Almost. I'm not there yet. But to understand things in their complexity uh, and in their significance, uh, for all that I think that we interpret our tradition and we may be adding to it, adding our own interpretations. I think sometimes we are just really beginning to recognize all the layers of our tradition, what is really being said. And it's really, and I think here already, Rashi, Ibn Ezra, and really going back to the rabbis are recognizing that it's not just about rote action. Now, to some extent, there is what we call magical thinking. That in magic, you just you say the right thing or do the right thing at the right time, and you're going to get results. So abracadabra, the rabbit pops out of the hat. Open sesame, the doors open. But that's not how we look at our mitzvot. They're not just, oh, I'll do this automatically. And as you know, I'm one who is not so comfortable with all the kissing. The kissing the mezuzot, the kissing the Torah. I have nothing against them. I think it's really beautiful. But I think people just do them by rote. They walk in, kiss the mezuzah, boom. But let's think about, what are we kissing? What is that? What is that mezuzah telling us? What makes a Jewish home? It's like the old joke about the guy who comes back from Israel and shows his rabbi, look at this beautiful mezuzah that could you put it up in my house? And rabbi says, sure, but there's no cloth. Oh yeah, it came with instructions there in Hebrew, so I threw them away. It's
You don't feel that way, Poppy. That's really funny.
Yeah. Oh, I thought that would be older than any of us. But it's not. There's more than, well, going back to there's more than doing a mitzvah. That the whole idea of mezuzah, kiddush, the whole idea of hidur mitzvah, doing a mitzvah in an aesthetically pleasing and beautiful way as possible. You could just dig a hole, and that's what they used to do. You could just carve a little incision into the doorway, stick the cloth in there, you got your mezuzah. But no, we make them into objects of art. A Chanukiah, a Kiddush cup. You can drink Kiddush, you can make Kiddush from a paper cup. But we don't want to do it just from a paper cup. We want to do things beautifully. And again, it's about creating an experience, not just some magical, oh, I do this and this is going to work. No.
Isn't that the whole concept behind Chidur mitzvah?
Well, pardon me?
Isn't that the
Sorry,
whole
Susie?
concept behind Chidur mitzvah?
Yeah.
That's what you just said.
Yeah, exactly.
I wanted to
100%
comment
correct.
about that. Hidur mitzvah sometimes gets to a point that you begin to think that Hidur is more important than the mitzvah. You have to be very careful about that. In other words, I'm a shared experience that, I tell people every so often I'm writing a new book, and the title of the book is going to be Mitzvot at 85. Okay? The first chapter is going to be on saying the bracha during Havdalah, Borei Minei B'Sameh. Why? Because if you were brought up in a Shomer Shabbos home, then part of saying goodbye to Shabbat is smelling the B'Sameh and having a B'Sameh box. That's so integral to the way you conceive of it that when you suddenly realize that you can't smell well enough to smell them by way of the B'Sameh box, and you're going to from now on have to buy them raw and smell them straight out of a little bottle that doesn't look 1/10 as nice as the B'Sameh box does. It's really, I'll tell you something. It was an experience. Okay, and now Brenda and I have gotten used to it. But at first we really had a very hard time with it because we began to see the Hebrew mitzvah as the essence of the mitzvah, which it really isn't. And you have to explain that to people. I mean, otherwise, you begin to think that that's the whole deal.
Right. I mean, I think that in terms of, and this is touching on my article in this month's bulletin, is that, we also want to make mitzvot accessible to people. You don't have to spend gobs of money necessarily to perform a mitzvah. And it's important. This is true for anything, that not to lose the forest through the trees, which certainly is very easy in Judaism, which focuses on the details. Hence coming back to this idea that you have to study the mitzvot because you want to know how to perform them. We want to do things. We want to pay attention to all the details. And I think it was an architect. I've heard it from so many different sources. God is in the details. When something is important, we pay attention to the details. It doesn't matter. I mean, it could be totally secular. It doesn't have to be religious. But when something is important, we pay attention to the details. Of course, reminds me of the other joke about Danny Bernstein, who goes to his Christian friend's house for Christmas, and helps him or before Christmas, and there he helps them decorate the tree, and as his father picks him up, his friend Jimmy Kelly, his father says, we love your son, but I'm sorry, he's not coming over for Christmas again. And his Jewish father says, what did he do? Well, we start setting up the Christmas tree, and he starts asking questions. How tall did the Christmas tree have to be? How is it too tall, or could it be too short? How many decorations does it have to have? What color do the decorations have to have? What kind of branches does the tree have to have? He said it was driving us crazy. So it's very easy for us as Jews to lose the forest through the trees. But if you really want to appreciate the forest, you have to know the trees. So here we go. Another take on this is Sforno. Carol, do you want to continue reading?
Okay, if by my laws you walk, chukot, is it chukot? Yeah.
Yeah, chukot.
Like royal decrees, something a person has to be guided by if he expects his endeavors in life to prosper. One who practices them is called walking. As was said, do not walk after their laws, as well as my laws you should observe to walk according to them.
Yeah, and you look above in the Hebrew, and you can see it's the uvechukotehem lo telechu, shall not walk in their laws. Vechukotai tishmoru,
And so, according to the laws of life, he walked.
Yeah, bechukot hachayim halach. There we have not just from the Torah, but even in Nevi'im. Now, it's kind of interesting because normally, on one hand, Sforno makes reference to the notion of a chok. We often make a distinction between chukim and mishpatim. Mishpatim, they mean to some extent the same thing. Or mishpatim are laws, but they're generally understood in our tradition as laws where we can discern the rationale behind them. But chukim are seen as laws that they're God's enactments, we don't understand them, such as shatnez or
red heifer.
The red heifer, exact. There are different things that are called chukim. So he acknowledges that chukot are like royal decrees. But it's more than just like, okay, you do it. But why are you doing it? What is implied by doing them? Well, what do you think Sforno is implying by doing them? By what's he trying to explain here? Why is he emphasizing, this whole business of the chukotai telechu? Why is that such an important phrase for him?
To succeed in life, to be a guide.
Yeah, to succeed in life, to be a guide. And basically he's saying, you can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk.
Oh, that's very good, Rabbi Papi.
It's
That would
not
also
mine. I think
explain. Well, I don't care. I heard it from you, so as far as I'm concerned, it's very good that you put it into the partial class today. Because I'm looking right now at a search of Chukim and Mitzvot in the same verse, and Halach and Shamar. And one thing I can clearly see, the plain partial chat of Chukotai doesn't mean laws you can't understand, and it doesn't mean statutes. It means the boundaries that I set, exactly like Chok Latam below Yavor.
in the
So
Psalms.
basically, and that's exactly what it means for us too. In Bechukokai Telech means stay on the road that I tell you to be on. If you go off the road, in the Shomer Shabbat community, we have a term for people who have no longer keep Shabbat safe. We say they've gone off the derech, okay? And that term is still, there are books written by that. Why do people go off the derech, okay? And so off the derech means doing things that Hashem forbids you from doing, okay? That's essentially what it means. So and that goes right back to the verse that you're learning. That's why I really like what you just said. It's not enough to talk. You also have to walk the walk.
Yeah, I don't have all my papers in front of me, but someone used that for their Devar Torah, and I thought, yeah, that's good. And along the lines, difference between, asot or lishmor at mitzvah, because also in our verse at mitzvotai tishmoru. I did my best to try and translate the Hebrew. Sometimes Sefaria, they just kind of translate, they paraphrase it, or they introduce all kinds of editorial notes, and they kind of they lose the forest through the trees, but they just get, they want to say what they want to say, not necessarily what the Parshan is saying. So go on, Carol.
Okay. And my commands you keep. This Shmira observance in connection with the mitzvot is the meticulousness in the performance of them. One is directed by them.
Yeah, that's not a great translation. The Hebrew, I should say, Hinei hashmira b'mitzvot hi hahashgacha ba'ofen asiyatam. Hashgacha, normally we think of supervision, like kashrut supervision. So I tried to catch it, but watching all the details, that's why I just use meticulousness. But to lishmor is to really be midakdek. I think he's implying here that you have to be very specific in your actions and what you're doing and why you're doing it. Go on.
This has been appropriately expressed by our sages. May their memory be a blessing. Sifrei Parshat Re'eh, Shemor, to observe is study. The verse is saying, if you will conduct yourselves in the ways of God, may he be blessed, that are included in the practical, that is the deeds of his Torah, and you examine these commandments to understand how they are to be performed and what is their purpose, then you will accomplish his intention that you be in his image after his likeness.
Wow. When the way Sforno is understanding this, of lishmor mitzvot, certainly bechukotai tele, walking. I mean, you got to walk in the right way. You got to walk in the right path. So you've got to be directed and you've got to be careful. But when you conduct yourself in such a careful, precise, and appropriate manner, then what are you really doing?
Becoming like God.
Exactly. This is a very interesting, in many ways. I'm not sure this is what he intended, but it's a very interesting way of both expressing the image to be the idea of being B'Tselem Elokim, But how one engages is an imitatio Dei. I just found this particularly fascinating. But again, Seforno, like Rashi and Ibn Ezra to some extent, understands that performing the mitzvot is not merely the actions, but everything that goes into the actions. How you think about what you're doing, and again, that it's not mindless action. Today we talk a lot about mindfulness. And I bring him up many times. My classmate, may he rest in peace, Rabbi Alan Liu, who had been running the Zen Center in Berkeley in the 70s. He certainly knew from Buddhist practice. And, one part of his return to Judaism was recognizing that, all the stuff that he found interesting that he was doing in Buddhism was like, wait a minute, I don't have to go anywhere for it. It's here. We've got it. And this is the sense of mindfulness that so many of our, even before you get to Kabbalah, certainly Kabbalah makes a big deal about it. But it's not just in Kabbalah. Kabbalah is often just an intensification of what the rabbis are saying, of what tradition is saying. In fact, there was one scholar of Kabbalah, his students would ask him, oh, how can I engage in Kabbalistic practice? He said, well, think about what you're doing when you're observing mitzvot. It wasn't, you have to go sit out on the top of a mountain and dress in white and, not that one can't do that, but, that's not what it's about. It's much more of this mindfulness. And then just when the end of Sforno here, go and observe them.
And observe them. Through this full acquisition of the manner in which you should perform the mitzvot, you will be acting out of the goodness of your own will, and do not do so out of fear, who act out of whatever reason.
Or should be like those who act out of other reasons. Sorry.
Okay. Rather, you will act out of love, desiring to do the will of God. May he be blessed. As our sages said, do his will as if it were your will.
Yeah, always appropriate to quote from Pirkei Avot during the period between Pesach and Shavuot. And a very famous line from Pirkei Avot is, you do his will as if it were your own. So it's part of this, performing the mitzvot is this imitatio Dei. And even though I'm not really interested per se in the Kabbalistic notions, I think also to get into the depth of how our tradition has understood this, a good place to look is in Kedushat Levi, the writings of Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev, who has some interesting, generally has something interesting to say. So would somebody else like to go on? If by my laws you walk?
Sure, I'll read.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Shell, sorry. I was trying to say
That's okay.
Shell, and I was thinking of Saul. So I was just thinking of the graduation. I mixed them up. Go ahead.
If by my laws you walk and my commands you keep and observe them. At first glance, there appears to be excess verbiage here.
Yeah, that's where I got the phrase.
Right. We would have expected the Torah to write simply, if you will observe my commandments, I will provide your rainfall at the appropriate time. However, it seems that regarding this, the Talmud, Bavli Kedushin states that a good intention, the Blessed Holy One will account a good intention as if it were an action. That is, what a person considers and accepts upon himself to perform.
That should be perform. Yeah, sorry, I did not. I said I really didn't edit this part.
To perform a given mitzvah. Then the Blessed Holy One considers it a deed, as if he had acted immediately. or the more so when a person actually performs a certain mitzvah without any distraction, then one can come to a higher level to do an additional mitzvah. And if he performs yet an additional mitzvah, then he will come to an even higher level. Thus, a tzaddik is accordingly referred to as one who goes from level to level. This is what is meant by a mitzvah brings another mitzvah.
So basically, again, reference to a vote, very famous line, mitzvah goreret mitzvah. Which there's plenty of commentary. We could have a whole session just trying to understand what we mean by that. But the sense here is that, even if you're thinking about doing something, even before you perform the act, if you have a deep desire to perform this, God will consider it as if you have done it. And why is Rabbi Levi Yitzchak seeing this, that, it's such a wonderful thing with this whole idea of God accepting a good thought or a proper intention as doing it? What will that lead to?
Hopefully, a fulfillment of more mitzvot.
Yeah.
Right. So it's almost a discipline, even if Levi Yitzchak and Jewish tradition would certainly say, "Yoter tov la'asot." It's better to do. It's all fine and nice to have a wonderful thought, but if it's nice to think about giving tzedakah, but your beautiful thoughts don't necessarily help a poor person until you give the tzedakah. It's I should daven today. No, yeah, it's a great thought, but it's not the same as actually davening. And so for Levi Yitzchak, he's expanding this sense of, or he's picking up on this kind of excessive language by saying, aha, it's because there's so many elements, there's so much involved in doing a mitzvah. You have to think about it. You have to have some intention and thought, and God willing, that will begin to train you in a way that you will do a mitzvah, and that will lead you to do another, and lead you to do another. And to some extent, this is the thinking of Chabad, and they come from the Hasidic tradition, and it's frankly the thinking of most Jewish educators. You want to expose people to Jewish involvement and Jewish practice, and hopefully by doing that, they will do more. And frankly, that's often what happens. Yehudi?
When I was studying at the Jewish Theological Seminary in the late 90s, I also registered for David Halivni Weiss's advanced Talmud seminar that was given not on the premises of JTS, but rather on the premises of Columbia University, several blocks away. And in those days, we didn't have everything you could store on an iPhone or a CD-ROM. You had to pretty much lug your stuff up there. And I got a little tired of doing that, so I said to him, "Can I leave it in your office?" He said, "Yeah, you could, but you got to put a card in there so I know it's yours and I know who you are." And I said, "Sure, I'll put in a card." So I put in my professional card. Now he actually looks. He finds out that I'm a doctor. Next thing you know, there's a patient in the group that clearly needs some dermatological treatment. And he approaches me the next time and tells me he wants me to take care of that person and not charge them. And to persuade me to do that, he says, if you do a mitzvah like that, you know what's going to happen? You'll get a chance to do an even bigger mitzvah. And he told me the story about a person in his community back in Europe that was Zocha, merited the mitzvah of doing Pidyon Shavuot. And people in the shul wondered, how did that person get to the ma'alah of having to do, one of the biggest mitzvahs in the Torah? He must have done something better, good in the first place, to get rewarded with the chance to do such a mitzvah. And he said to me, this is how way you should think about it when you proceed to do what I asked you to do. I said, okay, I like that very much. I will do exactly what you asked me to do. But I just want you to see how a man, the absolute top of the line Talmud and other Jewish scholarship is perfectly prepared to essentially say something along these lines.
Yeah. And a story of something like that. Well, I mean, you could call it karma, but there was a sofer in the conservative movement, Dr. Ray, who I mean, forget the safrut, the fascinating story, but without going into all the details, he was on the Atalina, the ship that was fired on by Ben Gurion, and he saved someone because it's not just you end up in the water, but when a big ship sinks, it creates an entire suction, and it begins to pull everybody that way, and particularly if you're near the rear of the ship and the propellers are going. So Dr. Ray helped this guy get out from the suction and really saved his life and pulled him out. Well, years later, Dr. Ray needed a very serious surgery, and it turns out that the surgeon was the son of the man whom he had saved. So,
That's right. But you see,
sometimes
we wouldn't use the term karma.
Pardon me?
That's not the term. We would hear a story like that, but we would be perfectly prepared to say, mitzvah gorer, mitzvah, etc. But we wouldn't use the term karma because that's really not a Jewish term.
Right, but I'm just saying that
it doesn't convey the way we feel about it.
Of course not. Of course not. No, but I'm just saying that today people might say that, and it's like, no, we got a better term for a better phrase to describe that. Really remarkable. And let me just finish off this section here, because we're coming to the end. VLP, and of course, there's also this sense of Ma'alim Bakodesh, you go up in matters of sanctity. We want to improve and constantly be able to achieve. We think about that in athletics, for example. Athletes work hard and perfect it so they can do the next level of skill, or they can be even better. But spiritually, we can do the same thing. And this way we can also explain the statement of our sages, may their memory be a blessing. It's from the Talmud Nida, Tana Devei Eliyahu. It was taught in the house of Eliyahu, not the prophet. This is a rabbinic period. Kol hashoneh halachot b'chol yom uftach lo chelek ba'olam haba. Whoever teaches or studies halachot each day is guaranteed a place in the world to come. Perush Zekai al tzaddik. This, of course, refers to a tzaddik. It's Rabbi Levi Yitzchak. He's using, he's operating within the Hasidic world and the thoughts about what is the role of a tzaddik. V'alze amar kol hashaneh halachot. All who studies halachot, dahainu shishna kol yom. That he really studies it every day. It's not, oh yeah, I study halachot every once in a while, like summer vacation, I'll pick up a book on halacha. No, it's somebody who studies it each day. Halichotav sheholech bechol yom vayom. His walking, the way he goes, his daily goings, his daily walk. I mean, the way he goes each and every day, lemadrega yoter gedola. He's moving to a higher level. Az muftach lo shehu ben olam haba. Then he is guaranteed of the world to come. Kind of the Jewish notion that you want to make it to the world to come. You want to make it to the world to come. Then do everything you can in this world. Very it's a very Jewish notion. V'zehu im bechukotai telechu, and this is what we mean by bechukotai telechu. You will walk in my chukot. Dahainu im tibaku bechukotai. If you cleave to my laws, az tihiyeh bivichinat mahalech, you'll be like someone who is walking in them. So you got to walk the walk. But it's also talking the talk here. You need both. You have to both think about what you're doing and you have to do it. There's a combination. There's all this excess verbiage is emphasizing the fullness of observing, performing, of living God's laws, of living God's commands. And, for Judaism, it is a way of life. It's not just you do this or you do that. No, you do it all and you think about it all and you reflect on it all. It's as Yehudi said before, it's a whole package. And all this just from this excess verbiage, to quote Rabbi Levi Yitzchak, of the opening line of our parasha. Fascinating, how our commentators, who totally understand the pshat of the verse, they know this is biblical style, but they're able to express some very deep ideas about not just what is the text saying in terms of its context, but also what does it mean? What is its significance for our lives as Jews?
It makes me
comments, questions? Go ahead.
Yeah. When God says to Abraham, Lech lecha me'artzecha el ha'aretz asher arecha, so the Lech lecha, it seems to be more than the pshat of just, go out of your land. I mean, in the context that you've explained this, it seems that not just go out of your land, but go out of the ways you did do and into the ways that you should be walking or going to, with, belief in one God and all that stuff, and teaching to others, which he did. So just made me think about that.
I think that's, how we understand Avraham, that, he's not just making a physical journey, but a spiritual journey. And, we just had that as well in the Haggadah. Mitchila otei avodah zarah hayu avotenu. Originally, our ancestors were idol worshippers, but we left all that behind. We've made a spiritual shift.
Right.
And, and I think it's important that when we think about our tradition, that it's not just a bunch of laws. And also why we have such an intellectual tradition. It's a constant reflection on what we should do, how we should do it, why we should do it. And that's how Judaism continues to develop in every generation. And what makes it contemporary in every generation. Judaism speaks to all time. And this is what's so wonderful in our tradition. Rochim to you. Everybody have a good week. Have a good Shabbos.
See you in Shabbos.
Looks like we have, yeah, and I think we at least have a nice day, so we don't need a boat.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Robert.